Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Couch Conversation. My name is Gary Daffin, and I'm the Executive Director at the Multicultural AIDS Coalition, which is a member of United We Rise, and we want to welcome you here today. For those of you who aren't familiar with United We Rise is a Black-led intersectional collaborative that reimagines a pathway to end the HIV epidemic while uplifting the health of all Black people. UWR, United We Rise, was started back in 2019. It was the brainchild of the National Black Gay Men's Advocacy Coalition, the National Black Women's HIV/AIDS Network, and MAC, Multicultural AIDS Coalition, which brought together people from all around the country to really look at the HIV movement and what was needed to really change the direction of the epidemic in Black communities. And when we got together, we really decided that our work would be grounded in dismantling racism that permeates Black life. And we wanted to engage to answer the question that we came up with, which was, what would the response to HIV look like if it were led by Black people? And that's been kind of the driving question that we've had over the past 5 years or so. And today we are having a conversation about Black lives, HIV, and immigration, living at the intersections. It's a continuation of our Couch Conversation series, which we've been having throughout this year during a time that I think we're all a bit unsettled, and there's so much going on and wrong in the country that we thought it'd be important to have a space for us to get together and to connect. So we have a terrific panel and moderated by my colleague Chioma Inaji. But before we get started, we always like to begin with a little bit of a breather, kind of a grounding exercise. And today we're going to have one that's just a video of a Soto Saint, an Haitian American HIV activist who died, I think, in 1994. So if we can play that, and we'll move on from there.
The children in the life. Another phone call, another man gone. How many pages are left in my diary? Do I have enough pencils, enough ink? I count on my fingers and toes the past kisses, the incubating years, the months ahead. Thousands. Many thousands. Many thousands gone. I have no use for numbers beyond this one. One man, one face, one torso curled into mine for the ease of sleep. We love without mercy. We live bravely in the light. Thousands. Many thousands. Child, I knew he was funny. One of the children, a member of the church, a friend of Dorothy's. He knew the Websters pretty well too. God, when he was 2 years. Remember, we used to sit up in my house, pouring tea, dropping beads, dishing this one and that one. Have you got any Jesus there? The singularity of death. The mounting thousands. It begins with one and grows by one. And one. And one. And one. Until there's no one left to count.
Gary, you're on mute.
Unmute. There we go. So thanks for playing that, everyone. Thanks. Sorry. So one other thing that we do during these couch conversations is to have an update on what is happening in Washington. I know everyone's paying attention or trying not to pay attention to the very rapid changing landscape of policy in the United States, which is, the basis of our conversations that we have. But we do like to have an update on what's happening, particularly around HIV policy. So today we're going to have an update from Max Boykin. And after that, we'll get started with the conversation.
Thank you so very much, Gary. Hi, y'all. My name is Max Boykin, he, him, his pronouns. I'm based right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and I am the manager of the Save HIV funding campaign, along with the movement director for the Black South Rising and a member of of the Prep Users Union and a couple other things. But here I'm today to really talk to y'all about what's going on in DC right now. So one of the big things to know is right now that Congress is in recess. Yes, for this week, Congress is in recess. So if you have a chance and you haven't had a chance to talk to some of your legislators and you want to let them know that they want to save HIV funding or about some of the other issues that are important for your community, this is the week to set that time with them, unless you're trying to meet with a Black Congress member, because most likely they are the Congressional Black Caucus and ALC, and which is starting this week and will be going on all week. So most of our Black legislators will be at Congressional Black Caucus week. But one of the things to also look into what's going on right now is there is appropriations that is going on right now, and that should be signed into law by September 30th. The problem is the House has decided to stay out of session all the way through the 30th, and they have a $2 billion gap in between HIV services on the Senate side versus what is on the House side. And so one of the things that we want to make sure is make sure that our legislators know that we want to make sure that we fully fund those HIV funding. We also want to make sure that we make sure that people are also able to get access to Medicaid, and also support the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits moving forward into 2026 and beyond. Unless and if they don't do that, people will see a huge rake on their increase on their health insurance, and then they will also have to worry about a lot of people getting kicked off of Medicaid, and that actually just puts more of a burden on Ryan White services, which we even see a cut in the House side of this bill. What we want to do is make sure that our senators do not pass this House side of the bill, and that makes sure that we call our legislators and make sure that they know so. I'm also going to put in one of our most recent action alerts, and this was around HIV/AIDS and Aging Awareness Day, which was last week on the 18th, which also happens to be my mother's birthday. And with that, some of the things that we all have going on right now is make sure that we still take time to meet with our legislators, call our legislators, and make sure that they know that they do not zero out this HIV funding, that they make sure it at least goes to what we have on the Senate side. And again, there's a $2 billion difference between what is on the House side and the Senate side. And the House is not giving very much background of why they're cutting all these funds, but we need to make sure that we push on them. We also know that a meeting that the president was supposed to have with Senator Schumer's office and Representative Hakeem Jeffries' office this week was canceled. And that is a big thing to lead, most likely that we will lead into a shutdown. Do we know how long the shutdown will be? No. Do we know how long this shutdown could last? Really, we do not know. We have not seen that the House has been willing to move on this, but the House and Senate will be then meeting again in October. And then we will continue to put that pressure on them while they are in DC. If you have a question about what this picture is behind my head, this is from an action that also the United We Rise was a part of in an action that we took up space on Congress's lawn, highlighting what these cuts will do, that they did both in reconciliation, that they then did again in rescissions, and now what they're doing in appropriations. This will lead to more deaths, and making sure that that we took these panels and we took up this space in DC to highlight this. And we will also continue be using these panels during a week of action in October. We will be bringing them down to Encuentro which will be done in Atlanta. We'll also be using them for ID Week in Atlanta. We'll be bringing them to Memphis and then Colorado and other places throughout the country to also bring them back again later on this year, taking up even more space. But also, if you are interested or want to be a part of this and you haven't had a chance to physically make a quilt, we also have a digital quilt option that is also on our website now that folks can use this space, create a digital quilt, add it to your or take a picture of a quilter's thing that they're trying to make space. We're also looking to have quilt making kits for folks to be able to send out moving forward. So if you have not had a chance, please check this out on the website. If you want to learn more about how we were able to save HIV funding or to just get more involved, feel free to reach out to me or go to our website at savehivfunding.org as we continue to push the fight and make sure that our legislators know that we need this Save HIV funding and they cannot cut it. Thank you, and I'll take it back to Gary.
Thank you, Max. Very important. And again, just a reminder, if everybody could put your name and location in the chat, that would be great so we can capture that. So we're going to move on to the conversation, and let me introduce my colleague, Chioma Inaji from MAC. She's a senior program director at MAC, and also is the person who helps keep United We Rise moving along. So enjoy the conversation. We have a great panel, and Chioma, it's all yours.
Thank you, Gary. So I hope everybody is doing well. Like Gary said, my name is Chioma Unaiji, and I am excited to be in this space with everyone and hold this conversation. What is a conversation that is very close to my heart, actually, as someone who is a second generation Nigerian and has over the past 20 so years been really focusing on HIV among African immigrants in Massachusetts and also nationally. And so I am honored to be able to hold this conversation with these amazing panelists, so let's just jump right in. I'm gonna ask the panelists, how are y'all doing? Y'all good? Y'all ready? Yeah, I know y'all gonna drop some amazing wisdom and action in here. So please, I'm gonna ask you all to please introduce yourselves. And while you're introducing yourselves, answer the question, when you hear the words Black immigrant, what comes to mind for you? What does it mean to you? What comes to mind? Anybody can get us started. Catherine, get us started.
I knew you were going to pick on me. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Bisola Labiran. My pronouns are she, her. I am Yoruba and Edo. I was raised in Northwest London. I currently live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a writer, social justice advocate. I care about the intersection of art and activism. And when I think about what Black immigrants means, I think of my family, some of whom are on this call, joining from London, where it's
wow.
8 p.m., at least 3 people, because I can see them clapping and
all right, family.
all right. Them. I think about our beauty, our excellence, our inherent wisdom, the magic and the alchemy of what it means to survive and thrive against the odds. I think of us as non-monolithical, all of our diversity, people of all genders and sexualities, or maybe like a kaleidoscope. I think of our languages, our spiritualities, and I recognize that this fullness isn't seen when we think about the socio-political climate. Instead, we are invisibilized to the degree that we are erased from narratives, and we are seen as taking away from the country rather than adding to it. But I think anyone who knows who we are knows that we actually embody so much more than is represented in the mainstream media.
Thank you, Catherine. Will, why don't you go next?
Absolutely. So, hello, everybody. I'm Will Ramirez. I was born and raised in Bronx, New York. So, Catherine, you're right there. But I've been living and serving in the South for more than 10 years. I'm currently living in San Antonio, former educator, veteran, Afro-Latino by the way of my father, born in Dominican Republic. And I serve as Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at the Southern AIDS Coalition. Now, SAC is a regional organization um, that works across 16 southern states to advance the voices of people most impacted in the region, to advance health equity, expand access to care, and ending the HIV epidemic in the South. Through policy advocacy, through coalition building, we bring together community leaders, health departments, and advocates to push for a lasting change. Now, when I think of the words Black immigrants, um, first thing that comes to mind is that Black immigrants are everywhere, but too often invisible. So when I hear that term, I think of communities in this country with high populations of Afro-Caribbeans in places like New York or Florida. I also think of communities in the Midwest with high populations of North and East Africans or West Africans concentrated throughout major cities throughout the country, right? I also think of myself. While while I'm myself and not a Black immigrant, my dad is, and I am Dominican and Mexican through my parents. And so, although that's my awareness, right, of Black immigrants in this country, that's not the norm. Um, they're not in the media, they're not in regular discussions, they're not in advocacy, and often not in policy, at least the conversations about them, right? I think that breaking away from the traditional understanding of who immigrants in this country are is the first step to understanding the gravity of the topic of immigration in this country. This idea of diversity through immigration often skews towards Hispanic or Asian immigrant populations and not often to Black populations. So if we only picture immigrants as Latino or Asian, we erase the millions of people who also call this country home.
Thank you, Will. Helen?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Helen Zimba, and I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I'm originally from Malawi. But I've lived in this country my whole adult life. I'm an activist, disruptor when I need to. And I also am program manager and a grant reviewer. And when I think about okay, first of all, let me say I'm involved in a lot of things, including Ryan White, because I feel like my voice needs to be heard there. And I'm also a member of the HIV caucus, as well as ASHE, making sure that Black women, from the diaspora, also we do have a seat and a voice at the table. So when I think of Black immigrant, it depends because sometimes it becomes as a negative to people when they talk about Black immigrants. But I look at myself, I used to say, oh, I'm an American citizen. But then, when people say immigrant, sometimes it comes as a negative way because to them, a Black immigrant, to them, it's like I'm a foreigner here, I'm a visitor here, regardless of your status. So that's how I look at it. So sometimes it's a good thing to be called a Black immigrant. Sometimes people use it as a negative thing as well. So that's how I look at it. But I'm always proud to be called a Black immigrant because I feel like I bring a lot of things to the table. Some of the things that, because we hear a lot of people, you know, want to be in the motherland. They say they are from the motherland, but then when it comes to things that we really need to talk about, they separate themselves from those issues. So yeah, as myself, I'm openly living with HIV. I'm open about it. I live out loud about my diagnosis because I'm thriving with it. And as an immigrant, I feel like I need to have a voice. So that's it.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, all three of you, for opening this conversation so very clearly and with intent. You all brought up the challenge that we have, right? The challenge that Black immigrants, whether you're coming from Latin America, the continent, or Haiti, we had our Haiti sibling ground us in this space. So wherever you're coming from, the diaspora, that there's a lack of visibility that happens here in the US. And I think it's important to say very clearly that lack of visibility is very much a part of the HIV work that we do too, also, which is why United Rise is having this conversation. And so I want to ground us in understanding what we mean by immigration policy, right? I don't think that it's clear, people are clear about what is immigration policy and how is it really impacting what's happening with a lot of maybe our clients, our loved ones, our family, our colleagues. And so, Will, I'm going to ask you to just give us an overview of some of the immigration policies that are being implemented and enforced, or even some that are being proposed that you think are very critical for us who do HIV/AIDS work to know about.
So I think my analysis is going to be a bit somber, right? Just because of the heaviness of the topic. So if I could use a word to describe our current landscape, I would say that it's hostile. You know, between policies added to the reconciliation bill that just passed a few months ago, which included increased funding for ICE, making it the highest funded federal enforcement agency in the country, to increasing fees for asylum seekers that automatically became a barrier for some folks, or the use of executive orders by the president to remove TPS status from specific populations, specific immigrant populations. This includes Haitian populations and Cubans, or even the authorization of state and local law enforcement to participate in immigrant actions. That was also an executive order. The Supreme Court is also weighed in on this with a ruling that just passed the ruling a few weeks ago that allows ICE agents to consider race as one of the factors during enforcement actions near the border or in certain rates. So overall, these actions and policies, you know, this is a hard part to swallow, but overall, these actions were received well by large parts of this nation's population. And that is a reality we have to wrestle with, that there is a large contingent of this country that supports these actions. And the diversity within these groups is also present, right? The diversity don't not only exist on one side. Gallup found, the Gallup poll, this company that does polls in America, found in 2024 that 55% of Americans view the influx of immigration or immigrants as a critical threat. 55%. So in other words, it's not just policy, it's politics. Because a majority of Americans now see immigrants as a threat. So that tells us that the challenge isn't only laws, it's also narratives, right? Is that the current landscape enjoys a significant socio-political support in this country, and to change that around will not only take policy change, but it's going to take narrative change as well.
Let's ground this a little bit more. Helen and Catherine, can you talk about what that looks like on the ground, right? And so, we talk about policies maybe at a higher level, and people are like, well, it may or may not really impact communities like in this moment. But I can definitely say, weeks after January 20th, there were immediate impacts on the ground. And so can you all sort of talk a little bit about what you're seeing happening within communities, particularly Black immigrant communities, because of some of the policies that Will talked about?
So yeah, I think what I have seen is that it has brought a lot of awareness. Unfortunately, I think people are paying more attention now, because in little things like we know, how people would come and have babies and automatically the babies become citizens, and that's not the case anymore. And people would go to emergency room to get help when they're sick, but now they're afraid to go because fear of immigration. And anytime somebody asks the name, even if the name is not going anywhere, people are scared to mention their name. So what has helped is to have a lot of discussions on assuring people And it depends on who is also delivering that information. Because if a person who doesn't look like me, who does not even understand what my fears are, what the community fears are, it's not easy to take that information because people feel like maybe they are being tricked because that's just the situation we are in right now. So it has brought up a lot of things, a lot of questions. People are wanting to know more. And a lot of people are now realizing that all these things affect them. They affect them because, we're thinking of people getting Medicaid right away, getting food stamps right away. And now that they need more to get those things, some didn't know that directly affects them as immigrants. So that has really changed for people even wanting more information. And I think that we need to do more, or, have a different way of presenting this information in a friendly way. Friendly way meaning, immigration friendly. Thank you.
And if I could just get clarity from you, when you say people, you actually mean like Black immigrants are now realizing like something is impacting their lives right now.
Yes, yes,
Policies.
yes,
There's an awareness, but there's a need for more education.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to bring up, that there is also this disconnect within Black immigrant communities around sort of what's happening at the state level and the local level and how that's directly impacting them. But I definitely agree, Helen. Now there's a heightened awareness to the point that people are fearful, and people are not wanting to even identify sources to get information because they don't know what's going to happen to them even when they step out the door. Catherine, did you want to expand on that question? What are you seeing in terms of the impacts of these policies?
Yeah, and I'll say on that last point about just the awareness and the need for education, that the policy world is deliberately opaque so that people will not understand what's happening.
That's very
So
true.
when we think about Black immigrants trying to grasp things, there's the added layer when we also think about language justice and the lack of translation into African and Caribbean languages for people to even grasp what's happening. And then you add on top of that the fact that the policy landscape continues to evolve every single day. So it's like we are trying to get ahead of what's happening to ensure that our communities have the information that they deserve because of this culture of fear that Will and Helen have named. People are in a state of true exhaustion. I know people that are in hiding right now, people who do not feel safe to be close to other people due to fears of surveillance, people who are scared about joining Zoom calls because how do we know how our tech is being used against us and being weaponized? Can we put information in AI or not? If I sign up for a Zoom call, do I have to put my information? How would you store that information? Everything has a question basically. And when we move through life with those questions and being in that continuous state of fight or flight, it has this toll on the body. So when we think about the state of exhaustion that people are in, and then this desire for them to have information at the same time, it's a thin line between wanting to be aware and what that awareness does to us, because it is very triggering to consistently know that our safety is being jeopardized in this country.
Chioma,
Go ahead. Yeah.
if I can add something, I think that sort of fear that exists within communities also leads to isolation within these same communities. Um, Black immigrant communities are on the fence about showing up for other immigrant communities being targeted at the risk of their own safety, right?
Yeah.
And also understanding that even if if they may not be the primary target of a crackdown, they understand that they eventually will be, right? There's that prevalent understanding, and the impact how they show up, it shows up in how they show up for their healthcare, how they show up for their social outings, how they show up at their workplace, even if they show up at all, right? So we collectively, I think, Helen mentioned it, that we've been hearing of families skipping doctor visits. And not because they don't care about their health, it's because showing up feels like putting a target on their back.
Thank you. Catherine, you brought up a very important, at least from my stance, a very important concept. that I think it's new in HIV, in the HIV field, language justice. Can you talk a little bit about language? And Helen, I know you've done some work around language justice too. So can you all please just talk a little bit about what is language justice? How is that applicable to Black immigrant communities?
Yes, it's the thought that we should make our words accessible so that it reaches people across the board, whether it's people of different generations, people of different backgrounds, regardless of where they live, they should be able to grasp the information in a similar fashion. So when we are thinking about translation or interpretation, and we're thinking about it within the migrant justice space, having Spanish interpretation or translation, for me, it's not enough. I want us to think about our people who are not being able to receive the same information and think about how we can include the appropriate supports for them to grasp it as well. And also when we think about I want to make sure you can hear me. Also, when we think about the words that we're using, trying to avoid the use of acronyms as well, so that we're actually explaining what we are saying so that it doesn't land as convoluted and so that it's digestible to the communities that we're speaking with. But Helen, I'm curious what you would add.
Thank you. I think it is the same thing because language justice does not just mean about translating the information from another language to another language. It can be in the same English, but with the words, break them down because we find ourselves, wanting to break it down. Same thing that we might talk to each other, but if you break it down, people might understand it better. So when it comes to language justice, it's more than just the language, it's the way you put things. So yeah, and that leads to, like you mentioned, I think even for healthcare, providers, as providers, we have this thing, we just give people pamphlets. So like, oh yeah, here, go read more about it. This is how you're going to avoid this and that. But we're not even thinking that is the person going to understand it. So language justice might mean, sitting with that person, explaining to them a little bit more about what we are giving them in their hands. Even when you're sitting there with the doctors, they're talking English. You can understand English, but in order for you to break it down, we need a little bit more than that. So you did say all that.
Yeah, and from what I know, language justice also recognizes that we should be providing information in the ways in which people receive information, right? And so it might not be the pamphlet, it might be going to the ethnic radio, station, and partnering with them to provide the information to the community. So it's also about what are the cultural ways, what are the traditional ways in which communities communicate, share information, teach, and how do we embed that within our work around HIV. And people should receive information in the language that they prefer, right? So it's not just, yes, even if a Black immigrant can speak English, if they prefer Patois, then that's what language,
Right.
should be, the information should be provided in. So thank you for bringing that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up the cultural part because I think culturally we know as Africans we don't talk about sex that much. We really don't.
We're doing it. Now we're doing it.
Oh, now we're doing it. But it took a long time to
we'll
even
talk about
bring it up.
Yeah.
So as providers, they might just say, "Oh yeah, you have to use precautions. This is how we do. You have to be safe. This is what you do." But culturally, sometimes that doesn't even go like that. We see people coming into clinics with their teen children we know they're having sex, but the parents are not even able to speak to them about sex because culturally they can't do that. So when it comes to language justice, if you have the peers, to speak about it, of course at home, we used to, it depend on the elders. to speak to us, but where the elders here, you can't get that. So
Or
that's
the
where
aunties, the
yeah,
aunties
or the
too.
aunties, yes, the aunties. You know, you be all of a sudden you become the auntie of the neighborhood, the, the auntie of the community, and that's one thing too. As Africans, we don't mind being called auntie. You know, people know you as Aunt Helen, as and this, but here when you say auntie, they're like, "Are you saying I'm old?" No, you have wisdom.
Yeah. There's a comment in the chat, a question in the chat that I think Catherine you'll be interested in because I know you're a creative. The question is regarding art as activism. In what ways does or can art disrupt spoken language barriers so folks can receive information?
I love this question. I'm going to try and be brief, seeing as this is everything I think about. But I think just the process of one creating art allows you to tap into things that maybe haven't even come to the surface for you. There's a whole science behind it that when we are moving our hands, whether it's to write, to draw, to create a sculpture, that there are even thoughts and feelings that we may have suppressed about whether it's our immigration status, whether it's our health status, that we can grapple with in new forms. And then when we now share it with other people, maybe words didn't land well for them, but looking at colors and seeing that image is something that resonates with a memory that they had in their past, in their childhoods, or something that they see for their futures. So it's a way of tapping into other ways of thinking and other ways of understanding, but I've definitely see it happen in real time where sometimes words can just be too much, especially seeing as we are kind of inundated with information and text, that sometimes seeing things in a visual format, in an audio format, makes it easier. And I see this actually also happening in an interesting way on social media. And I know that many of us have interesting and complicated relationships with social media. Like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it somewhere in between? But one of the things that I will say is that people are very creative with their content. And through having a time limit on these videos, they are being very concise with their words and omitting jargon. So people are grasping it quicker. Or they're thinking about how can I make this visually stunning so that people remember this Know Your Rights video. So thinking about not only art and activism, but also the tech that we do have, regardless of how we feel about it, if we're on these platforms, can we use it in a strategic way to help people remember things because they may not remember that large reports, but they may remember that 1 minute video that you post.
Great, thank you. So we definitely don't want this conversation to be that nothing is happening in Black immigrant communities, like Black immigrant communities aren't navigating and resisting. And so we know that there are some organizations and some networks that are doing work to support these communities. Can you all share some of what strategies are happening or even what some tools are happening? And, you know, Catherine, you mentioned Know Your Rights trainings, videos, and the intersection with creatives. African Communities Together put out a great suite of videos, Know Your Rights videos in different African languages that are common African languages. I'm gonna post it in the chat, but that's an example of an organization sort of, you know, resisting and putting out a tool to support communities and protecting themselves and preparing themselves for what is happening.
I think we are in a time where we have to be creative, you know, on the things that we do in order to bring people together. So we do know that we Africans will like to get together, have food, fashion, or whatever, you know. So I know that the communities are using these things, and that means, you know, thinking out of the box. If there's a fashion show, you just say, hey, can I bring some information on HIV? You know, for me, it's like HIV in the policies that are out there, and also making sure that we are connected with the people who actually know the subject, because like I'm not a lawyer, I can't answer those questions about immigration because I don't want somebody to get in trouble and say that, oh, Helen said so. But bringing in, you know, people who can also get the right information to the people when they need it in a safe place. I think having a safe place where people are comfortable is the key. I know, like here in Dallas, we do have a place called the Pan-African community. So people have stuff happening there. You know, they sell things, they sell books, they have people showcase about whatever heritage they have. So if it's a Ghanaian day, they will have a Ghana day. You have a Malawi day, we have something. So people come to say, oh, let me go see what they're doing. Oh, let me see, what kind of food do you eat? What kind of clothing do you have? What things do you make at home? So on those things, when they happen, you just take that opportunity to also give some information. And the more people know you, the more people trust you, because right now it's about trust.
Mhm. It's about building that trust.
Yes, about building that
Right,
trust.
right, exactly.
I wanted to highlight a few organizations that are doing some really good work, and the amount of resources that now exist to inform nonprofits, businesses, advocates, and other stakeholders on what they can do in these times. Organizations like the ACLU, the American Public Health Association, the Network for Public Health Law, and the National Immigration Law Center, they all have guidance that they have made public for folks to use in these times. And I think that what makes a difference is when organizations arm communities with tools such as legal guidance, public health information, and policy advocacy. That way, people don't feel so isolated, and in turn they can start feeling like they're part of a collective effort.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that because I think also as we have this conversation, we have to be asking ourselves, for those of us who are working in HIV organizations or are providing HIV services, as an organization, what are the ways in which we are protecting our clients who are immigrants and also our staff who are immigrants, right? So if I don't know, Will, if any of those resources that you shared provide some of that guidance.
They're more general and they're meant for organizations to be able to mitigate some of the damage that immigration enforcement creates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So
Catherine?
here in Dallas, I would say in Texas, we do have a legal service who offer services pro bono, and they're Ryan White funded. And there are a lot of people who used to use them when they have like cases of being kicked out of the housing just because of their HIV status, or work issues because of their HIV status. But now we are finding more people use them for immigration issues, but they can only do that because after they came, because we use the Ryan White platform, because you can reach out to more people, and they came to do a presentation with the Ryan White funded organization, letting people that this is one of the services that they're offering to the community. So people felt a little bit comfortable. So now they're getting there knowing that, these are known people that they've been working with, for the longest, but now they have to work with them, on immigration issues. There used to be another organization which was huge, Catholic Charities. So they had, pro bono lawyers, helping people file their papers. But that was the first thing that was closed, when they started. So there's nothing else right now except for the legal hospice.
Yeah, I can see that that's the first service, one of the first services that would be cut.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier, you mentioned that, as we think about these immigration policies and thinking about the impact on health, that folks are not going to see their doctor. I want to emphasize also that folks are not going to get tested, right? Like it's not just going to people
Yeah.
living, African immigrants or Black immigrants living with HIV not going to their doctor. It's also that Black immigrants are not coming to get tested. And we
Mm-hmm.
see that in our own programming where when we used to be able to do an event and test, individuals, folks are partner with like Haitian organizations, and then we'll have 30 or 40 people coming and we're testing folks. Now, our Haitian partners are saying, like, I don't know if people are going to show up today. Like,
Mhm.
probably have to cancel because I don't know if people are going to show up, right? So it's not just hurting our care services, but it's also impacting people coming to get prevention services.
Yeah. In Toronto, like people don't want to come and get tested because they're afraid. Like I can talk about Texas with the HIV criminalization. They're like, oh, you want me to get tested so my name can be out there so I can be deported because people don't know. They're afraid, so they can't get tested. We have people who are about to disclose now they can't even disclose because they're afraid.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, so people are falling out of care.
Yeah. Thank you for
No.
using the HIV
Mhm,
criminalization. Yeah.
mhm.
It strongly intersects with immigration policies, anti-immigration policies. Yeah. Yeah. Catherine, did you want to say? I saw you come off mute. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all I would add to this is the importance of mutual aid as something that I've seen happening on the ground. So as we are thinking about the overarching policy work, to not forget that people need groceries,
Mm-hmm.
people are still trying to pay rent.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are thinking about the fear that people are experiencing going into doctors' offices to work, the importance of accompaniment. There are networks that allow people to accompany people to court, for example, to think about strength in numbers, because there is a way in which we can intervene just by being present for people. There is a way in which we can intervene by starting to record when we see ICE officers in a particular neighborhood and posting and letting people know, if you are approaching this train station, there are 10 ICE officers there. Please alert your communities and so on. Like when they know that there are eyes on them, it shifts. It may not change outcome necessarily, but there is power in knowledge. So as we use our platforms appropriately, we can support each other in different kinds of ways. And I will say that Freedom for Immigrants has a really important tool on the website where it's a map that you can see the detention centers across the country and also the different reports that have been issued against them as we think about hygiene, sanitation, abuse of power, and so on. So as we are trying to depict to people what is happening on the ground, I really recommend looking at their website and sharing that tool with other people as well.
What's the name again?
The organization is called Freedom for Immigrants, and they have a map. And as you look at the map, you can see the detention centers across the country, all the different reports, including like violation of COVID-19 protocols, just anything you can think of. It's a really useful map to just get your head around what's happening across the country.
Thank you. I think somebody posted it in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Baji did a report several years ago about the disproportionate rate of Black immigrants being detained and deported, right? And really talked about, also as part of that report talked about the inhumane way in which people are being treated in detentions, right? And so you would, if you listen to what our administration says, like, people are in detentions not that long, right? But, Baji and other Black-led immigrant organizations have documented that folks are in detention for like 10 years, waiting on a court date, just waiting on a court date, right? Not even like in the process of deportation, waiting on a court date. And we know that, there are cases now coming up where Black immigrants are being detained, and it's not even about their immigration status. Like that's another myth I think we need to address as part of this conversation, that at this point now, we're not even talking about undocumented statuses, right? We're talking about all immigration statuses where folks, whether they're seeking asylum or whether they're even naturalized, are very valid in fearing for being deported or being detained, you know. Um, Earlier, but all of you all mentioned sort of the lack of the Black conversation in the immigrant space, right? Can you talk a little bit more, share your thoughts around how can we who identify as Black immigrants or who do work on behalf of or who partner with Black immigrant communities or even serve Black immigrant communities, how can we ensure or begin making strides to ensure that Black immigrants are part of the bigger immigration conversation? What are the strategies that we can use?
So sometimes it's just about jumping in. I found myself jumping in because I realized that not everybody knows what's going on. Because I remember one time I had just come back from Malawi, like a few weeks after that, and somebody that they're educated, and I'm thinking they know better, and they're like, "Oh, so do you have a passport?" And I'm like, I just came back. And they're like, oh, because we were worried about you, being gone to see how you were going to come back, back in this country. So it's about educating people and say, so let me tell you, how these things work. So sometimes we just have to jump into the conversation as expats, because at that point you become an expert because literally they don't know. And just calling it out too, calling it out. It's one of the things that might work in not being afraid. I know that not everybody is open about to talk about even their immigration status, because
Yeah.
just the name only can put you in a situation. You have an African name, all of a sudden people are thinking, oh, are you legally here just because of your name? They don't even know if you're a citizen or not. So when that conversation comes, I think that we should be sitting ourselves there to say, hey, let's talk about it. Let me tell you how these things work. Yeah.
I think it's important to acknowledge that there is a sort of invisibility that shows up, right? Because it matters. This invisibility matters because if Black immigrants aren't being spoken about, then no one understands the gravity of the impact on immigrant communities overall, right? There's an awareness gap that isn't filled. And so as policies impact these populations as well, their stories aren't being told, and therefore their pain and their hurt go unknown, right? So when we don't name Black immigrants, we weaken the whole fight for immigrant justice. We can't fix what we refuse to see.
I think also some of the change can be in our personal lives, us thinking about how we tell our stories, our family stories, archiving it. That's something I stress to everyone I speak to, because we're in a space where history is continuously being erased. I don't think I need to tell anyone on this call what's happening to our cultural institutions, our museums. All of our narratives are just being destroyed at this time. So a way to resist is by thinking about your own migration story, the migration story of your people, and the richness of that, and putting it in the form that feels good to you. And then in the spaces that you're in your organizations, also thinking about doing the same thing so that there is record of it. So we really should think about the importance of storytelling, especially with our elders that are still here. If you have grandparents, great grandparents, even if you're fortunate enough, please speak to them and do some of that storytelling work. I think that that's important. And then also those of us who are working in racial justice spaces, abolitionist spaces, thinking about cross-movement strategies. Because when we are talking about detention centers, I think sometimes people hear it and they think of it as something more cushy than a jail. I'm like, no, people are in a cage just in the same way they're in a cage when we think about jails, So when we are thinking about abolition and strategies, we should be thinking about cross-movement strategies that interrupt the carceral system in its entirety, because we know that a lot of people that are in detention now were once in jail. They were picked up by ICE on the steps and then taken into a detention center and then will be deported. So they're going through compounding forms of trauma. So in order to think about liberation, we have to think about liberation in its entirety.
So I want to stretch our thinking a little bit. So what would a cross movement strategy look like? Like what would it look like? Who needs to be involved? What are the organizations? What does that actual tactic or activity look like? And maybe that's, maybe it's challenging to be done, right? It's challenging to answer those questions, but I think I agree with you, Catherine. Like that's where we're at. Especially if we recognize, especially for this population, this community, that there's a need to have that cross movement work happening in the immigration space as well as the HIV space, right? As well as sort of what's happening around racial justice. But any thoughts on what that cross movement strategies could look like?
Yes. I will say National Bailout, for example. So National Bailout is a collective that bails out Black mothers and caregivers every Mother's Day. And in doing so, there isn't a discrimination whether the person is in a jail or in a detention center. So just by operating with that strategy, the message is that all of our people deserve to be free. So I think how we are thinking about our approach to the work can be a cross-movement strategy in itself. And another way that I see cross-movement strategies happening is, for example, how racial justice movements in the US are learning and in conversation with justice movements in Palestine, for example. That conversation and the exchange of knowledge and wisdom and activists literally going from one space to another and amplifying each other's causes is a way that we can think about the cross-pollination of ideas and building power across the globe, because we know that what we are seeing isn't just an isolated phenomenon in the US. We are seeing movements across the world that need to be recognized and that should be thought of as we are thinking about building power.
Helen, Will, you have any thoughts around that? Yeah.
Helen, you want to go first?
Oh, okay. Now I was just gonna echo Catherine, like, that's really powerful. And I want to say that, there's power in storytelling, like we said in the beginning, because sometimes these policymakers, they don't understand until somebody says, hey, look at me, this is what's going on with me, or look at my family, or look at this real story that I'm about to tell you. So sometimes instead of them just reading, having, people to tell their stories, it's a big thing. And I think it can get more attention. And we can't also do this alone. We have to use our allies. I think that there are people who are not, Black immigrants, but they do believe they can feel us. So in order for us to reach their people, we need to use them as well too.
I think in this moment, the most important thing really is leading with solidarity. And, I think that is the fuel that's going to keep the movement going and allow it to be successful. In spaces where traditional conversations about immigration don't include Black bodies, include Black bodies. And in other spaces that are mainly around brown issues, include conversations about Black bodies as well. And so creating this notion that this is something that impacts all of us, right? It's something that needs to be at the forefront in any sort of conversation moving forward. So the increase of solidarity among different affected groups is something that I'm really enjoying seeing right now, because I am seeing the rise of that, because that is something that truly fills me with hope in this moment.
So what would you all challenge the HIV field to do? And that field could, when I say field, I mean organizations, you know, people in positions, other, you know, communities outside of Black immigrant communities. Like, what would you challenge the HIV field to do in order to support, fight for HIV among Black immigrants?
I would say primarily is an understanding that this is not the moment for ego-driven work,
Mm,
that this is truly the moment for collaboration. And if that's not something that you're leading with, then move out of the way.
straight up. Straight up. Catherine, Helen, what would you charge the HIV field in this moment, where we're seeing all of this hostility, as we'll put it, you know, towards Black immigrant communities? And we also know, I mean, what we didn't mention is that we do know that there's a disproportionate impact of HIV on these communities also, especially within our Black immigrant communities that are in metropolitan areas. And so we know that there is an increasing rate of HIV in these communities. And so wanting to make sure that we are able to tackle both. And like Catherine said, um, cross movements are happening. So what would you charge the HIV field with?
I think this moment just calls for us to be as vulnerable as we can about our fears, about what we know and do not know. So I think the charge will be to lean into vulnerability, because when we are talking about fears around being criminalized, whether it's for being an immigrant or for your HIV status, that compounding fear, the culture of it, the atmosphere, the impacts, is something that shouldn't be underestimated. So as we are bringing people together and thinking about strategies, I've seen, especially now in the social political climate that we are in, there's a push towards we need to do this, we need to do that. And I want to see spaces where, yes, we need to move forward, but we also need to hold people with a lot of care. And we need to think about how to do it in a healing centered, trauma informed way so that we are not re traumatizing people and also causing harm due to the speed that we're moving at. So I think there's a piece around vulnerability, there's a piece around pace, there's a piece around healing, and also giving grace to people as mistakes are made, because mistakes are inevitable when we are doing this work that's so complicated and bringing together different causes in this way.
I think, yeah, I think everything has been said. But I think that we do need to charge people that there's an intersection with HIV and immigration, because people are the same, because it doesn't matter, you know, where you come from or what you look at, you know, on how, you know, HIV came to you. But the fact is that, you know, people are living with HIV. And now, just charging people to educate others more. Right now, you know, there's hope, and yet, you know, the information is not getting, you know, to the right people. There's hope now. You know, in the 90s, we were talking about people, you know, dying left and right, but now people are living, but they're only living because there's help out there, but we want that help to continue. The help is there, but people can't get to the help. So I charge people to continue to educate uh, about HIV and intersection of them all, and also to be looking at people as a whole person, because if people come to us, you know, for help, we shouldn't just focus on HIV. We should focus on the person as a whole person, because they might come in and they do have domestic violence going on. They might have, you know, child abuse going on in the home, or, you know, fear of of other things that surround them. So, you know, in order for us to get to all these things, we have to focus on a person as a whole.
Thank you. And as we are a community that is caring for Black immigrants. And Catherine, you mentioned healing, like this need for healing during this time. What does safety and recovery mean for this community? That's navigating both sort of HIV care and these immigrant policies. What does that look like for the community, and what are the ways that we can make sure as providers, HIV care providers, prevent HIV prevention providers, that we are holding space for that healing?
So excuse me, sorry. I think that safety looks like being able to walk into a clinic without the fear of your information being used against you. It means knowing that language, that race, or that status won't shut the door to life-saving care. I also think that recovery is more than just like medicine or medication. It's about sort of restoring trust in a system that has often or too often treated Black people or Black immigrants with suspicion. So I think that true safety and true safety looks like stable housing, legal support, healthcare, without barriers, and communities where people can show up fully without fear. And I think that that's the foundation of recovery.
Helen, Catherine, I'll open the space for you to share. What are your thoughts about safety and recovery for this community?
So I always think of I guess it's a dream of having, rapid response, because if we could have like, a team of people, a team of organization come together, in this case, immigrant-friendly spaces, so that when something happens, then people are not going from this place to this place or answering the same questions in different spaces. So if we could have some kind of a rapid response, probably that would help us a lot. I know that people don't want answer those questions over and over again because they get suspicious. We are already in the suspicious mode right now. So if we could do that, I feel like that would help us. It's just a dream.
Dreams are good. We need we need dreams. We really do.
It's just a dream, because if one person calls, we know that you just know who to call. We just know who is gonna pick up. Because if you have a rapid response, you present that case, we just know that, oh, this one will be picked up by so depending on what's going on.
I think for me, safety is definitely a collective thing. It's a movement away from Western ideas of you having to make yourself safe. It's a co-creation of safety that is necessary. It's how we can co-regulate with each other and provide resources and meet people's needs in a way that they can drop into that safety. I think when we put on just one person to make themselves safe or to find it, it's like it's a thing that doesn't resonate, at least with my cultural background as a Nigerian woman.
It can be isolating too.
Yeah, it's very isolating,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't align with a lot of the approaches and the ways in which we move through the world, where we're actually holding people through processes, whether it's holding people through sadness, through grief, through happiness. We need each other. We desperately need each other. So I would want to see a safety that looks like that. I want to see a safety that allows people to dream beyond today. And that's something that I rarely see when our communities are under threat. It's like, how can I put food on the table today? How can I think about my job security today? How can I think about what I need to do in terms of clothing my children today? And when I start hearing people think about tomorrow or next year or the year after, that's when I start thinking that we are moving away from being in survival mode to thriving to planning for the world in which we want to see. And I desperately want that for the communities that we are talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I want to end our conversation with a question. I just want to make sure that I didn't miss any questions in the chat. Let me just double check. If you have a question, this will be the time to post the question. Oh, I missed the question by Grace. Okay. How do we empower our doctors to talk about sex, not just as pleasure, but as trauma for many refugees who migrate with a history of rape and sex slavery in camps and war situations? Yes. Mhm. How do we empower our doctors to talk about sex, not just as pleasure, but as trauma for many refugees who migrate with a history of rape and sex slavery in camps? And that might have been the way in which HIV was transmitted to them also.
I guess having that talk as a normal conversation, but not like a questioning, because it can be traumatizing for some. Not just about sex, a lot of things. I remember one time being called because an African immigrant was refusing to get her blood drawn at the hospital and like crying, didn't want to. When they called me to go and speak to her, we didn't even speak the same language, but because she was from Africa. But even me talking to her in the same English that they were talking to, I did find out that in her own country, they were getting blood, from them as a punishment or as because of the war that was going on there. So for them, for her, it was traumatizing because the hospital here, they didn't even explain why they were about to take her blood. They never even said, okay, we're doing this so that we can find out how you're doing so we can give you right treatment. They just say, give me your hand. And that was traumatizing. So I think that, it can be the same way to talk to people in a way that they're comfortable in cultural sensitive way. I know that here is like normal just to talk about, sex just like that. But I think that, talking to them in a normal sensitive way might help people to be comfortable. They can even, if they know the story before they see the patient, they can even bring it up before she does or he does in a better way to open up the conversation.
I'm definitely hearing that need for us to have a moment of understanding
Mm-hmm.
on people's, especially immigrants' sort of migration journey. I think the part of the rhetoric that's out there is, folks are coming here to steal jobs, coming here for all these reasons when there's a good number of folks who are fleeing their own country out of persecution, whether for their sexual orientation or gender identity, or because in civil war. And with that comes a lot of trauma. I know I've had clients who actually were raped in refugee camps, and that's how they became HIV positive. And so there could be a lot of trauma definitely around that. And so that point of understanding, Helen, that you're bringing up, I think is important, starting from a point of understanding.
Yeah, I think to that also doctors should be reminded and held accountable to asking for consent as they are touching people.
Even
Um,
asking questions.
Yeah, even asking questions.
Yeah.
In some of my research and conversations with Black immigrant women, people have expressed just how traumatic something like a pap smear can be, especially as a survivor, especially when a doctor is doing things to you without asking or telling you that they're about to do it. And then, of course, we know across the board that, especially with Black women, gender expansive people, there's this idea that we do not experience pain, even when we are saying that we are in pain. So there is accountability that is necessary within the medical arena that one, consent needs to be required, and then also when someone is expressing pain, the action should be stopped right there and then, versus this undermining behavior that we see when we are naming the pain that we are in hospitals.
Yes. So I've enjoyed the conversation with you all. I appreciate the ways in which you sort of supported me in thinking about this topic and stretching me to think more about what does it mean for not only me to do the work, organizations I'm connected to, and how I can be part of more movements around this. And so I know that others through the chat also have the same uh, experience as part of this dialogue and are thankful. I want to close our conversation by asking you all a question. Of course, we've talked a lot about sort of the fear and the policy threats on Black immigrants and how that's really showing up in real time for individuals and their families. So all of you all are in the work. All of you all are, embedded in the work every day. And so what is giving you hope and what are you building forward? What is giving you hope and what are you building forward?
So what gives me hope is solidarity. I'm seeing immigrant groups naming anti-Blackness and Black organizations lifting up immigrant voices. That kind of cross-movement power, I think, is what changes narratives and eventually changes laws. There's this rule in mobilization and organizing that was created by two researchers, Erica Chenoweth and Maria J. Steffen. And their book is called Why Civil Resistance Works. The rule is the 3.5% rule. And it speaks about how to bring about socio-political change. And it uses historical evidence to make the point that no regime or government has ever survived once 3.5% of their population actively participated in a campaign against it during a peak event. So we recently saw what happened in Nepal through solidarity of its population and dismantling and then reassembling their government. The youth were the leaders in that movement. It just happened last week. Within HIV and immigration advocacy, though, I'm also seeing younger advocates, people who won't accept the old silos of the movement and are stepping forward with courage. And I'm really heartened when I see that. So what I'm building towards is a future where movements don't compete for attention, but stand together shoulder to shoulder. Where immigration, HIV, racial justice, and health equity aren't necessarily separate fights, but sort of part of the same struggle for dignity. Recognition that again, this moment isn't about ego-driven work. It really is about collaboration. So hope for me isn't just really optimism, or isn't optimism really. It's really a strategy. It's a strategy for the times, so that we can then engage in justice, engage in fairness, and engage eventually in social political change.
Thank you. Well, can you put the name of that book in the chat, please? Helen, Catherine, what's giving you hope and what are you building forward?
For me, what's giving me hope is the togetherness, like Will said. I think that we are getting together more and using the expertise that we have in order to reach more people. And what's giving me hope as far as HIV is concerned is that there is, something good coming up if we can. Because with, for those who know, with the U equals U and all the medication that we have coming up, and if we are involved, that gives me hope because then we're able to voice our opinion. We're able to say that, yes, this is out there, but how can I access it as an immigrant without fear? So people are getting together to find those ways. To find those resources apart from the ones that are already there. What gives me hope is that I think we are stepping out of the box because, with the things being cut, now we are forced to think that what if it doesn't come back? What else do we do? So what's giving me hope is that everybody's, the people that are involved are really thinking to say, what if we don't get this money back? What do we do?
Catherine.
I think what gives me hope is one, this call and the fact that everyone who's on it chose to be here on a random Tuesday afternoon / night, depending on if you're in London or or somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, yes, family.
Yeah, so we are modeling in real time what it means to share information, to learn, to be in dialogue with each other, to challenge ourselves, to grow. And I want to see more of this. I want to see more of this. I think I personally get a lot of hope from my nieces, Renee, Maro, Orezi. When you look at children and their ability to play, to experiment, to make mistakes, to innovate, I want to see us lean into that as adults. Because I think sometimes the uptightness, the way in which we kind of move through the work is like we are scared to make a mess. And when we release that and we get into that strategic, playful, creative mindset, that's when the most beautiful things happen. I also draw a lot of hope from nature when I think about what has been done to this climate, and the fact that there are trees still standing, trees that have seen more than any of us have, anyone in our ancestry potentially has, like that to me is something to draw hope from. And then when I think about the future that I'm hoping for, I drop down into the present day and I'm like, the future is composed of what we are doing right now.
Absolutely.
So whatever I'm hoping for, I should lean into it in how I'm showing up today for myself, for my people. So I challenge myself to that every day. So after this call, how am I going to spend my evening? How am I going to communicate with my people? If I'm talking about the abolition of policing and ICE and all of these things, how am I also holding myself accountable to omitting that policing that I do of myself and my perfectionism and all of those things? So thinking about liberation as a personal project is something that gives me a lot of hope.
Liberation as a personal project. I love that ending. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you, Helen, Will, and Catherine, for being part of this couch conversation with Every Black Party, focusing on Black lives, HIV, and immigration. We are hoping that United We Rise does these conversations monthly, and so the next one will be October 28th. So please, everybody, make sure you're connected to United We Rise so you get information on our next couch conversation and that you're registered, because it only gets better. Every month it gets better. And we have wonderful people who join us and have these powerful and intentional conversations. So thank you again, and everybody have a good rest of the day, evening, early morning, wherever you're at. Thank you, everybody.